Hello, Ross here from Cosmic Crucible Studio, and I'm trying something a little bit different with my latest NAMM release, and this is like I suppose more of a demonstration walkthrough rather than typically I just release the same, like DI sample looped with all the different settings, and I have done that for this. However, it's a little different in that I'm only releasing the one, but this pack actually comes in 3 different modes: the preamp only, the Victory, the Copper Preamp. And then also I've combined some with some power amp samples, and these came from a member of the community. They provided some power amp only captures of their DC30 by Matchless, one at the master at 730 watts and the other at master full 30 watts. And in my preamp only, I've also included the profiles for the 15 watt settings. Now, what I'm choosing to demonstrate are actually the coupled ones from the master at 7. But you do have the choice of using the preamp by itself if you wanted to combine it with your own power amp or just use it as is. One thing I found with the Victory amps, the Copper preamp, is that it's really bright. In fact, I don't think the treble ever got above, I would say, like 10 o'clock, right? Like 40%. And even then, I think a lot of these are still quite bright. In fact, you can see my guitar actually doesn't have a tone knob. It's a humbucker guitar, PRS, and I've actually rolled off some of the top end naturally like a tone knob would on the guitar. And if we actually look here, I am using a bright speaker, which is something that I should mention. I'm using the York Audio Fox Blue Edgy Mix, which is quite bright. But I am still, just with this high shelf here, rolling off a bit of top end, and even then it is quite bright still. But I do think there are some good sounds here, and like I said, I did find the original preamp a little unruly, but with a little bit of EQ and sculpting, I think you have some really nice sounds here. And so what I've done as well, I've included a lot of like darker versions, and this is important because the darker versions were using the tone knob on the preamp itself, but that darkening happens before the power amp. And I think that's actually quite important when it comes to taming some of the brightness, because the power amp introduces a bit of brightness with the power amp saturation as well. Forgive my atrocious of playing, but it's hard to look at the camera and play at the same time. However, I think a lot of you will like the darker ones, and I did make those so that people with single coil pickups could hopefully enjoy these. So let's go through a few of my favorite sounds. The bitey one is one of them. It's a bit more than edge of breakup. Chimey is kind of nice as well. I find, especially on the neck pickup, right? There isn't too much saturation, but it does break up a little. So I quite liked that. Now the edgy one is edge of breakup. So it's supposed to be fairly clean. Like if I pick like cleanly and quietly here. But if I dig in a bit, you can hear just a little bit of that breakup there. And I think that's a really nice sound for cleans. Live, I think that would be a great setting to use. And then I also have this indie crunch, and that's the one that for me, I was trying to model on that like probably early 2000s like indie sound. And I think that does pretty well at that. I will say I really struggled with this one because I really enjoy the character of the sound of this preamp. Like the saturation just sounds so good, especially through this particular IR. But at the same time, it is so bright that it does need a little bit of work. My captures are quite, I would say, raw and honest. I haven't done a lot of work to them because I want you as the person using them to be able to do your own EQ and that kind of thing on it. So as I kind of demonstrated earlier, these do need a bit of work, but I really liked this one. The Pristine is basically trying to make it hard to break up. So it is very clean. So you'll find that on the preamp only version, it's almost impossible to drive it into saturation. But if you do pick hard enough with the power amp baked in, you do get a little bit of that push. and that's quite nice as well. And then I have these like round settings. Now, what are these? So unlike an actual Vox amp, the Copper preamp has a mid control. So what I did with these is I put the mid up quite a bit, probably around 70 to 75%, and I rolled back the bass and the treble controls, and you get this kind of thing. The mid control is still quite subtle though, so it's still not super MIDI. But it does have that sort of radio-esque feel a little bit going on. And then I did that, but with sort of different levels of dirt. So this is the sort of hairiest. Which I think is actually a really nice sound. And then we have the more sort of edgy one, right? So just a little less dirty. And I think those go pretty well. And then we use the top boost, which a lot of the time, I've got to admit, I didn't love the sound of the top boost, but you can get some really interesting tones here. So for instance, we have this like crunchy setting. So that's kind of nice, I guess, for that more like rock Queen-esque. It's none of these captures are trying to emulate Brian May specifically, I will say that. But it does kind of get you there. And the mid-forward one, I think, is quite nice as well. Almost getting into Marshallist territory there, right? Those early plexis. These circuits do, share some of that DNA, so that's not too surprising. And then this rich one I quite like for leads. I actually realized that in this pack, I didn't actually capture a proper lead tone. I may release a separate one for that, but you have sort of this kind of thing going on. So that's with plenty of bass, and it does have that kind of... So it's a very nice full sound, and I think that will get a lot of use for people. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to go through this one a bit more because I don't think it's weird. I think the sound loops don't do it justice. When you're actually playing it, it's a really expressive set of captures, but it has some quirks. So what I would do, I would encourage you to check out all three releases. I put them separately. There's the preamp only, and then that also has the power amp captures as part of it, like separately. So you can, if you want, stack them together with your own levels going into the power amp. And then there's the power amp baked in capture set. So the Master on 7, which is my favorite, and then the Master on 10. So check them out. The link's in the description there, and let me know what you think.